Warning: this episode contains discussion of domestic abuse and financial abuse. Please listen at your discretion.
This is Andrea Longton.
This is Leah Freeman.
And this is Ebony Perkins. And we are Renegade Capital.
All views expressed in this podcast are our own. We are not financial planners, investment advisors, or tax advisors. The views that we have on this show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the people who sign our paychecks. So please keep that in mind and always consult a trained financial professional before you start moving your hard-earned money. Let's dive in.
We're back.
I love it. Oh, wait. So before we do that, do you want to give your update?
Which update? That I left my full-time job. I'm a full-time stay-at-home mom now. Or the one that I have a publication date in April. Or might lose my mind in the middle of things, and it's all going to be great. This is my 7th day of being blissfully unemployed. It's really nice. I went to the doctor yesterday with my kids, and instead of being stressed out trying to be in 2 places at the same time, we sat and read the dental trivia. It was awesome. Like, this is fantastic. I don't need a mental health break from taking my kids to the dentist on a work day. So it's been lovely.
Are you homeschooling them or are they in school?
They are absolutely in school. My daughters are getting ready to start 2nd grade on Monday, and George is doing 5 days a week pre-K. That child needs, just like many children, but my child really needs to be around other children. His pre-K is very play-based, where he gets to spend all day running around with naked feet on the playground. So he's super excited about that. Drop him off in the morning. Everybody has their shoes on. You come pick him out. Everybody's shoes are very carefully laid out on a nice little tray outside every day. I'm like, that's awesome. Good for you. He's like, Mama, we get to play with naked feet. That's awesome. Excellent. Wear shoes at home, but that's awesome.
Oh, I'm loving that. Leah, how's life?
Yeah, no, life is good. Busy stuff. Bridget, Virginia is going to build a house. Pickleball business is opening in December. I'm going to Philly tomorrow. I get to see Jody Harris.
Oh, wait. Pickleball business. Is that you are doing a pickleball business?
Me, yeah.
That is so dope. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's cool. Actually, it's revitalization of a dead mall too. So we're putting 12 courts in the old Macy's footprint, and it's Regency Square is what they're calling it now. So I'm not a pro athlete, but
That's very cool. That's very cool.
How are you doing, Ebony?
All is good. Life is good. Renegade Capital is what's giving me some energy to push through.
So we're talking about women today.
Oh, we are talking about women, and I am so psyched. But before we even jump in on that, so my question for you all is, how do you define financial independence for yourself individually?
ooh.
It's tough to define it as an individual for me because my life is defined around my spouse and the financial and economic decisions we make together. And I always think about that. There's a line in Little Women from the Greta Gerwig version where Amy March says, marriage is an economic proposition. And that hits home for me, probably because I'm a finance nerd, but just about how you set up your life with someone else. I mean, you can set it up however you want, but we share a bank account and we make financial decisions together. And that financial independence piece is one where you feel comfortable that you can be independent as a person within a relationship. And that one is a little tricky to define sometimes whenever you are so closely combined with someone else's financial decisions. And we've been married for 11 years. And so we have 11 years of financial decisions we've made together that have worked out. Yay, knock on wood. But untangling that now is challenging because everything is really weaved together, where it's hard to separate one financial independence from another.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a different response because my mom, when I was a kid with my sister, would say, girls, you got to get your college degree because you never want to be dependent on a man. You need to be able to leave him if you want to leave and be able to stand out on your own. And so my parents are still together. I mean, they've been married 50 years, but that was something that my mom said to me growing up consistently. And so, yes, my husband and I share a bank account, but he has his own business account. I have things that aren't connected with his. And when I think about financial independence as someone that is married with a child, I'm like, yep, I don't need his income. And he does not control my finances in any form or fashion. I mean, there are influences, yes, and we've co-signed on things, but like legally separating all of that could be done pretty easily, and I would be able to spin out and be self-sufficient without him. It kind of reminds me, like, when women couldn't even get credit cards or bank accounts without their husband's permission. So I have a very, very emotional reaction to like a man needing to sign off on my man or partner. I don't know that I'll be curious from our guest speakers about partner violence in same-sex relationships, and if there's the gender dynamic is significant, or if it really is, kind of within a relationship. But that financial control is why a lot of women stay, and kind of are not able to, even if they want to leave in the middle of the night. They have nowhere to go. They can't afford a hotel room because he controls the credit cards.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Coming as the single one, who's not yet married, I often think of financial independence as freedom. I think of it as security. I'm always the one that's like making sure that my savings and my emergency fund is like set. I also think of financial independence as like the ability to create the life that I want to create,
Hmm.
right? And I view money as a tool. It's not the only thing, but it's the thing that will allow me to like create the time I want to spend with my family, right? It allows me to be able to take time off. It allows me to be able to go on a trip. It allows me to be able to just, I don't know, have a gym membership, right? And so I consider that independence to be freedom, to be stability, to be security. It's kind of how I define it, without having a partner, especially at this time in my life. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, I know that I feel like I know where you're going to come in on this, but how important is financial independence to you?
Financial independence for my partner, not important that I feel right now. Financial independence as a couple, very important.
As an individual, I'd still say it's like a 9 or a 10. Jacob and I have been together for 20 years. I don't see that changing, but it's so ingrained to me as a woman to be able to stand on my own 2 feet without anybody behind that or control. I think it's not even the support, it's the control that I don't want to give up, or will not yield to. And so being supportive and integrated with somebody as by choice is different than kind of being controlled. And so not being controlled, a 10.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Absolutely.
What about you, Ebony?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was understood. I'm a 10 plus. Like, that is a hill I am willing to die on.
Yes.
I want to have a good life.
Yeah.
And I know that in our capitalist society, that is one of the tools in order to make you do it. So,
Finance is fuel. You have to have that finance to be able to do whatever you want to do in your life, just like you were talking about, Ebony. So being able to feel comfortable that you have the fuel that you need to get to the next day, to get to the next stage of your life is instrumental in feeling secure.
absolutely.
Ebony, what do you think about when you think about economic violence?
When I think about economic violence, I hate to say it, but I often view it in heteronormative terms. But it's often, one partner restricting how another partner can use their combined finances. It's often the first step among many in order to do entire control in a relationship and controlling the other person. It's just the gateway drug, if you will.
When you think about an example of economic violence, what pops into your mind?
I think about partner checking every single expense on a credit card. And granted, that's important, but viewing it from a space of, you're not allowed to use this card. And if you do, then there will be repercussions. I view it from a space of a partner, where I've actually seen you are not allowed to sign this check, even though it's a joint account and we both have equal ownership of it. That's a form of economic violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially when you have dual incomes. Sometimes when you first said that, I thought about some couples that I know maybe where she happens to be staying home at the time and is not earning an income, and the husband in this case, will limit her ability to buy shoes for pickleball or a new paddle. And she's a 41-year-old woman, and I don't know obviously the internal discussions around how they spend and save, and maybe new pickleball shoes is not a priority, but I feel like there's a layer there where, it's a little bit more than just now's not a good time to buy shoes. It's like I have to ask permission to buy shoes, which is different than we're saving and we're being frugal. Or at least I'm interpreting it differently. Now, having dual incomes, maybe let's just say 50-50, everybody's making the same amount and it's the same paycheck, it's their same bank account. Like that's, I think, Ebony, what you described, just kind of even when you're contributing, you still don't have control over how the household is being managed.
When I think of, finance within a household, I often think of the importance of communication and that it's a two-way street, right? It's a partnership. I remember listening to something from the Wall Street Journal today, and they're saying how many couples are taking on the role of CFO versus COO, right? And one is helping the day-to-day operations, the other is watching the finances. But they would say that they were very intentional about not using the phrase CEO because it was a partnership. And when I think of like economic balance, is viewing it from the place of I control, I approve, and I can deny any and everything. And everything must run through me as a CEO versus the partnership and the collaboration piece. Andrea, what about you?
I don't know. I'm coming at it from a very different place, at least of how I value individual financial independence. And so I'm really taking a time to step back and think about it. Because I feel like we have that CFO, COO relationship, my spouse and I do, where I manage our family's financials. And so maybe that's why I feel comfortable with having that of not viewing financial independence as an individual, but as a couple, because I have, I don't want to say control, but like I manage that. And so I feel close to it and comfortable with it and know what's going on. And so when I think about economic violence, it's, if I were to lose that control and then have that flipped around, what would it feel like if I was not managing our family's financials? And to not have that view over it, and to also not be the one saying, let's do this with our financials. That feels different. All right. This is Andrea Longton.
This is Leah Freeman.
This is Ebony Perkins, and we are Renegade Capital. Today, we're talking about how economic violence limits financial independence for women. Learn how you can use your investments to support women today.
Renegade Capital Podcast is proud to be sponsored by U.S. Bancorp Impact Finance, a subsidiary of U.S. Bank, which is an industry leader in providing financial solutions that help create positive impact for communities and the environment. For 35 years, its tax credit investments and syndications, lending, and other financial solutions have helped create affordable housing, spur economic activity in underserved communities, restore historic buildings, develop renewable sources of energy, and strengthen community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, nationwide. Learn more at usbank.com/impactfinance.
Today, we're joined by our friends at FreeFrom and Self-Help Credit Union, one of this season's sponsors. We are so grateful for self-help support, and we couldn't do it without them. FreeFrom is a national organization based in Los Angeles whose mission is to dismantle the nexus between intimate partner violence and financial insecurity. They partner closely with Self-Help Credit Union, a national community development financial institution that provides responsible financial services and lending to small businesses and nonprofits. They also develop real estate and promote fair financial practices. FreeFrom and Self Help will join us today to discuss their work with women experiencing intimate partner violence and how they help them become financially independent. Amy Durrence is a lawyer and advocate of survivors of gender based violence. In her role, Amy serves as Director of Systems Change Initiatives and leads FreeFrom's work to advocate for the passage of survivor wealth centered policies across the U.S. Kimberly Jones is Director of Community Engagement Midwest with Self Help Federal Credit Union. She helps individuals and institutions align their mission and values with their banking. And Nuray Ozbay is a global social impact practitioner with expertise in gender equity and economic justice. She currently leads investor relations at Self Help Federal Credit Union. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. That was such an energizing kickoff, Ebony. So, as you mentioned, I define myself as a global social impact practitioner. And throughout my career in the social impact space, all of my work was at the intersection of gender equity and economic inclusion. My first paid job out of college was working as a project assistant at one of the largest women's nonprofits in Turkey, Istanbul, where I'm originally from. And there I started my journey into the feminist movement in Turkey and then later in Europe and then global. Then I started engaging with global women's organizations and I learned a lot related to movement building and fighting for justice. Currently at Self Help, my work is around impact investing. So I do work with our mission supportive depositors and help them create deeper value with their funds. That impact is obviously closely related to equity and inclusion. And in the past couple of years, together with Kim Jones, we are co-leading an internal initiative at Self Help, which we call the Gender Equity Initiative. And we've been partnering with Amy and the FreeFrom team on that. So this is my brief intro and my passion towards gender equity.
Thanks, Ebony. So my experience is a little more personal in the sense that I was raised by a single mom. You know, we struggled quite a bit growing up and, watching my mom try to, make ends meet and balance finances. In hindsight now, that I'm sort of in this field of finance, and knowing and having all the information and knowing all the resources that are available, I wish that she had a lot of the information that's available here, and had been able to take advantage of a lot of the financial literacy and financial capability resources that were out there. And my mom was never a homeowner. She got really, really bad information as a young adult and just made the decision never to become a homeowner. And so she was never able to build assets, as an adult. And so when I first got into banking, I saw that even a lot of my coworkers who were women also, came from similar backgrounds and didn't have those resources growing up. So for me, it was really personal to see women in my family, my coworkers, my peers who really didn't have access to, financial information. And so that's what really drives me to do this work.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here and always a pleasure to share space with my fabulous friends from Self Help Credit Union. Amy Durrence, she, her, hers from FreeFrom. And, in terms of my journey to having a passion about gender equity, it really started, I guess, well, I should say I was raised in the South, and we didn't really talk about gender equity when I was coming up. I can speak for, I guess, maybe the white Southern experience of like women. I was certainly surrounded by what felt like very powerful women, right? And they didn't they spoke their mind, all these pieces. They always felt very powerful to me. And yet I could see that they were exerting their power in different ways from the men in my life, right? It was more of an indirect pathway to leverage power and to really use your power. And like for example, I grew up in the Southern Baptist church, no longer in that faith, but I had this very, very strong mom, very strong grandma, very strong and opinionated aunts. And yet we were going to a church that said, you absolutely are not allowed to be leaders in this institution from the Bible, which is like our, for that religion was supposed to be the text. So it was a little confusing, I would say, seeing folks trying to use power, but having to do it sort of behind the scenes, it looking so much different from the way that I saw men using power growing up around me. And I kind of just assumed this is the way I'm going to have to live, right? Like I'm just going to have to take power in the spaces that I can and use it where I'm able. And I think it was really when I got to college, I left sort of that community and was like, whoa, wait a second. Like, these are some things that we really need to be talking about and thinking through, And so that sort of awakening that I had in college really manifested into action and a passion and a career path for gender equity more in law school when I was able to participate in my law school's domestic violence clinic as a student attorney representing survivors of domestic violence and getting temporary restraining orders, things of that nature. And then more broadly, gender-based violence, understanding too, myself as a survivor of gender-based violence. And that was like a whole nother journey. But that's really where it was kind of a strange path to it. It was kind of more like realizing that something was off kind of, and seeing that women weren't really able to use their power in the same ways men were. That drew me first in, and then it's really been my career path and my passion ever since.
Amy, I just want to say I can relate a little bit to the kind of the lenses being pulled off. I took my first women's studies class as a later student, former college dropout, went back to school, took women's studies intro, and was like, wait a second, hold on. You mean I don't have to get married? I don't have to take his last name? And then like from there, poli-sci, women's studies major, like all the things, but it was that kind of first awareness of a different way of being in the world and the power behind that, to be empowered to do that as a woman. So I can appreciate kind of wow, this is different than my world at home,
Totally.
It's interesting, Amy, as you talk about gender-based violence, the assumption is that it's always physical or mental or emotional, but people also often forget the financial aspect of that, and how money and is often used as a power, as a controlling mechanism.
Now, dig deeper, Kim. How is money often used as a tool for control?
Well, I certainly saw it in my family, unfortunately, where women were encouraged not to work. Women were encouraged to, hey, let me take care of the bills. You don't understand numbers or you don't understand math, so I'll take care of the finances. But really, that was just a control mechanism. Not having access to checking accounts, not having credit in your own name, not having, bank accounts in your own name. In those types of situations are often, it can be a form of abuse and can be a form of control in relationships. And so I know Amy is the expert here, so I'm going to defer to her. But, those are some of the examples I've seen, how finances and money can be used to be controlling.
Before, women couldn't get credit cards or sign for a home. That's like the 80s, right? This
Absolutely,
isn't like 50s
yes.
and 60s. So how new is this ability for women to secure some of these capital tools and wealth building assets?
This is going to sound funny, but I was actually watching an episode of Sex and the City not too long ago, and that show was in the 90s, and one of the characters was talking about not being able to get an apartment because they didn't have a spouse to sign, on their credit, on their credit application. And this was in the 90s, so that's still, within our lifetime that we're seeing that women are, allowed to have access to credit in their own name, without having a father or a husband or another man or male to, co-sign for them.
Amy, can you shed some light for us specifically on what does What does this look like? The intimate partner violence used through the form of finance, and more specifically, your work with FreeFrom, and what are you doing about it?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. So, Kim kind of mentioned like folks usually forget about the financial piece of intimate partner gender-based violence. And I think to even overstate it, people just don't know. It's not even like something they know when they forget. I think a lot of folks who aren't being subjected to this type of harm or aren't aware that someone they know or love is going through that don't understand that piece of it at all. And I think that I'll get into what exactly I'm talking about in a moment, but we really see that in the laws across the United States. Like we are just now starting to see states acknowledge economic abuse as part of intimate partner interpersonal violence in the definitions of domestic violence in state law. So that's just now happening. To get into, okay, Amy, well, hold on. What are you even talking about when you're talking about domestic violence? Economic abuse. Whoa. When you're talking about economic abuse, what are you talking about? So let's start there. Well, first of all, 1 in 2 trans folks and 1 in 2 cis women in the United States will be subjected to some form of gender-based violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 2. And so I do want to pause and say, we're talking about women. Whenever I'm saying women, that includes trans women. I think we also have to be really aware and care about the rights of folks who are gender expansive and gender nonconforming as well. As I mentioned, they're subjected to gender-based violence at the same, if not higher levels than other folks in the United States. And so really important to make sure that we're including them as part of our conversations. With that, there's that prevalence. And then we understand that the number one obstacle to safety for survivors is financial insecurity, the number one obstacle to safety. So what do I really mean when I say that? Well, 84% of survivors identify not having enough money to take care of themselves or their kids as their biggest barrier to safety. The stark reality is that being subjected to gender-based violence is extremely expensive. The CDC estimates that the lifetime cost of domestic violence for cis women survivors is $104,000 as the lifetime cost. Yes, $104,000. And we actually know that that is an underestimate because that number does not take into consideration the additional and significant costs of economic abuse, this specter that we've been alluding to. Now, economic abuse can look a lot of different ways. Kim, you kind of shouted out some of the more subtle ways I would say that folks are able to commit economic abuse. But generally speaking, it describes when a harm doer is controlling or exploiting a survivor's finances. So I'll give you some examples that we've heard from our work at FreeFrom. This could look like a harm doer stealing money from a survivor's bank account. It could look like a harm doer preventing a survivor from going to work or getting a job. We've heard of folks doing things like offering childcare and then at the last minute refusing childcare so a person's not able to go to their job. Similarly, we've heard a lot about harm doers taking out credit cards in a survivor's name without their consent or knowledge and then running up debts in the survivor's name. We've heard, we worked with folks who get out of a relationship and come to find out they've got tens of thousands of dollars of debt in their name from credit cards they didn't even know existed. Oh, and I should mention also, it's not only just the dollar amount that you might have in debts or costs of that nature, but also folks are being subjected to credit damage, and we know that will follow you for a long time throughout your life, and it impacts like basically every aspect of your life in the United States. You're looking for housing, you're looking for insurance, you're looking for employment. Like all of those people are going to pull your credit report. And so we can start to see these financial consequences that really move beyond sort of the moments of peak crisis and harm. And I'll throw out a couple more statistics that we've learned at FreeFrom. And before I pause for some reflections and questions about all this, I know I'm giving a lot of information right now. But to really demonstrate the financial devastation of gender-based violence on survivors, folks in our network, this is statistics I'm sharing from responses on surveys of thousands of survivors from across the U.S. On average, survivors had only $289 that they could alone access at the time that they responded to the survey. And on average, they had only $10 in savings at the time that they responded to the survey. And folks identified at the time that they responded to the survey that they had just over $10,000 in gender-based violence related costs at that moment in time. So as we can see, it's financially devastating. It's really difficult to recover from harm, to heal, when you don't even have the financial security necessary to cover the costs.
Question about the relationship dynamics. And we're saying, the gender. And so with same-sex relationships, is it different in the kind of a controlling and abuse, or just less prevalent when the genders happen to be the same in a relationship?
That's an interesting question. And, from what we have seen, the economic abuse is a part of all of the gender-based violence relationships. In terms of survivors that we engage with are of every gender and of every sexuality. And it seems like across the board, folks are being subjected to this type of financial control and exploitation, regardless of, I guess, the sort of specific nature of the relationship. It's definitely just such it's such an effective tool to control someone, especially in the in the state of in the United States, right? It's like the finances are kind of everything, right? And liquidity and being able to cover your costs, but also having access to financial services, having a bank account, all these pieces. You need all of these things to be able to move around in the world and navigate the world. And by controlling that, it's just such an effective way to control another person, is to get your hands on and control their finances.
I was just processing on my end when you said that, the average person who has gender-based economic violence, the survivor to have $10 in savings and $289 to have access to only $289 and trying to exit a really hard situation and create a whole new life for themselves, and with access to $289, and how overwhelming that feels to me right now, of how would I start over with access to $289. And I have kids, and so I'm always thinking like, okay, and it's not just me, it's these tiny humans that I'm responsible for too. And so that's the big thing for me, is just processing. And that's really overwhelming. Like that is just terrifying to think about.
Amy, what are you and FreeFrom, what do you do with all of this information? Because I know if Andrea's overwhelmed, I know I'm overwhelmed. Leah, I don't know how you feeling about any of this, but what what have you done in order to try and make a dent in some of this?
I'll start with some of the programs that FreeFrom offers a little more directly, and then I'll pause and hear your discussion about that, and then I can also talk about the more systems level pieces and institutional pieces. That's really where the focus of my work is. But at FreeFrom, one of our hallmark programs is what we call our safety fund program. And it was really born out of us trying to create a rapid response to COVID. So in the spring of 2020, when COVID, came to the US shores, whatever, we as an organization paused and said, wait a minute, what are we going to be doing in this moment that's going to be as impactful and effective as possible? Because we know that this pandemic is going to disproportionately impact survivors. So what are we going to do right now for people across the US in this moment? And we decided as a team, let's get folks cash. Like, we understand how expensive everything is and how financially devastating it is to be subjected to gender-based violence. Let's support folks with some liquidity right now so that they can hopefully cover some of their costs and be able to stay safe and keep their family safe. And so we essentially just give folks direct cash grants. It's up to $250. And at this point, we have given $1.93 million directly to over 7,000 survivors from across the country, representing every state, DC, and Puerto Rico. So as part of that, we were like, obviously the primary goal is let's get people cash. Let's get them cash ASAP. Then what we realized, as I mentioned earlier, there's kind of a dearth of data and information about the financial impacts of gender-based violence, particularly on a large scale, like with a big sample size, understanding what the impacts are. So we said, wow, we really have a real opportunity here. We're engaging with so many people from across the country. Like, let's just ask them some questions, optional questions, and see what we can learn about what they need. And so all the data that you heard me spit out, the $289, the $10, that's data that we were able to, that survivors shared with us through this program. So that's where that data is coming from. That's been a really transformational program. We've heard a lot of stories about what folks are able to do with $250, quite frankly, in order to get and stay safe, but I'll put a pin in that. We're also providing a savings matching program for survivors. I believe we've supported folks in building in total over $500,000 in emergency savings, which has been a really great program. But that's still just helping one person at a time, right, in their situation right now. So I'm going to kind of move right into some of the systems change that we're trying to accomplish at FreeFrom.
Well, Amy, before you go into that, can you help me understand how far $250 can go? Because when you said $250, I kind of went, oh, that's it.
Right.
But that's because of the world that I live in and how I spend my money. So help me understand how that can be spent well and in a meaningful way, even at amounts some would think are very small.
Sure. And to be very clear, our program is totally trust-based. You tell us that you're a survivor and that you need the money, and we send it to you. And we've heard from folks what they've been able to do with this money. One person in particular is coming to mind. She had a custody order with an abusive ex-spouse for their child that they shared. This individual, the harm doer, had said, you better have our kid at this place and this time that is in this order. If you're a minute late, I'm taking you to court. I'm getting my attorney. We're going to fight to get me back custody. That's a very common tactic that we hear, abusing litigation to get back at survivors. It's a common tactic. And this individual, the survivor's car broke down. And so this is very problematic. This is a big deal because as the harm doer is threatening, try to take away the child. And that would be an enormous cost if she had to try to get an attorney, if she had to try to miss work to go to some of these hearings, try to get childcare, all of these things, in addition to the potential of losing her custody of her child. She was able to take that $250 grant and get her car fixed. And get her car fixed really quickly, get her car fixed for cheap because it was somebody in the neighborhood, right? And so a little plug there for our really flexible approach and no strings attached approach. Survivors know best what they need. Survivors know best how to take care of those needs. Survivors really are incredible at things like budgeting, even though it might not come across as like a traditional budget, but they're having to do a lot typically with a little. And so giving folks just no strings attached cash, trusting them and their expertise in their own lives, we've really seen impacts from that. So you can really see, so for example, if we were a program that rather than no strings attached cash, we gave housing vouchers out. Well, okay, that's great, but that's not going to help this person in their situation. They're not going to be able to take that housing voucher and go to get their car fixed. Even if we had, for example, said, okay, well, we're going to pay directly to a third-party vendor. We'll pay this person that's on our approved vendors to fix your car. Well, that might be on the other side of town from this person. That might cost 2 times more than what it would cost for them to get their car fixed down the street at somebody that's a family friend or something of that nature. And so it's another, I guess, quick plug for the cost effectiveness of doing no strings attached giving and really trusting the person that's receiving those funds to be able to do the best with those funds.
But Amy, what I'm also hearing in that is that you're the power. You're not taking power and choice away from them in another form or fashion. It's their choice. It's their resource. They're empowered to go and do and take care of their lives. So thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, of course. And actually, you kind of touched on another interesting point, right? Because inadvertently, existing resources, right? The ones that are, they're providing support for people. So I'm not trying to knock them. Okay. But the housing vouchers, the programs that are saying, okay, we're going to give you this credit, but you can only use it from this particular list of vendors. Or in fact, we are going to make the payments for you, or you make the payment, but you better send us a receipt. What is that kind of sounding like? Sounding a little bit like the economic abuse that folks are being subjected to in their harmful relationships. So that's not really a transformational way to go about supporting folks. And that's why we really push back at FreeFrom and are constantly advocating for more trust-based programs across the board, for exactly the reasons that you've stated. And this is really where my fabulous friends from Self-Help Credit Union come in as well. So as I mentioned earlier, prevalence, 1 in 2 cis folks, 1 in 2 cis women being subjected to some form of gender-based violence in the US. That means that every financial institution has customers that are survivors. Every credit card company has customers that are survivors. Every insurance company, you're seeing a pattern here. Every employer has staff that are survivors. Right now in the United States, we are very focused as a society in terms of how we respond to gender-based violence on moments of peak crisis only. When is the physical violence at its worst? In the aftermath of a sexual assault. And we treat it as a crisis issue. We only give short-term crisis responses, and then that's that. Well, there are all of these things that happen in a survivor's life before that moment of peak crisis. And then there's so much that happens in a survivor's life after short-term support has expired. We're missing so many opportunities to resource folks so they hopefully don't ever have to even get to that moment of peak crisis. Or once they have, they never have to do it again. And I think because we're so focused on peak crisis as a society, our imagination has been limited about who should be coming to the tables with solutions for this problem. We're thinking, who responds in a crisis? Okay, well, that's police. That's the government in other ways. And it's the individuals that are involved in the scenario. So the survivor and the harm doer. But wait a minute. This person, the survivor's got a job. They've got an employer. They're going to work. Okay. Maybe they're going to school. Maybe, they're using their credit card. They're going to their bank. They're opening bank accounts, all of these things. If we move our imagination, if we expand our imagination before those moments of crisis, then we can also start to imagine how other aspects of our other pillars of our society can come to the table to really supply some important and essential solutions and support to this problem. So at FreeFrom, we're really trying to push back on the common narratives and say, wait a minute, you have survivors you engage with every day, and you can be supporting them, not as FreeFrom does, not as a nonprofit organization, but let's use banks as an example, or credit unions. You can be supporting your survivor customers by just being a really good credit union, by just being a really good steward of your customers or your co-owners, whatever the case may be for the particular institution, for just helping keep their assets safe, right? So we at FreeFrom are really looking into the private sector to say, you're engaging with survivors all the time. And guess what? You can be supporting them. You could be helping them just by doing what you already do as an institution, but doing it a little more thoughtfully and doing it a little better.
Renegade Capital Podcast is proud to be sponsored by Self-Help Credit Union and Self-Help Federal Credit Union, which believe in the power of finance to transform lives and communities. Are you an impact investor looking to make a difference? Look no further than Self-Help, where your deposits can create positive change. Don't just invest for profit, invest for impact. Visit selfhelp.org/invest-for-impact today and start depositing into a money market or term certificate with Self-Help Credit Union, where your money can change lives. Self-Help Credit Union, ownership and economic opportunity for all.
Can you share a bit more about the institutional change and systemic change you're trying to make?
Yeah, so as a result of our engagement with Amy and FreeFrom, we've certainly started looking at a few things. So are there any things in our policies and procedures that might cause an additional harm to women or people experiencing gender-based violence or any type of domestic violence? We're looking at our training. So all of our staff members go through elder abuse training. And so we found that also tracks in many ways to domestic violence abuse. And so we're looking to see if we can integrate those trainings for our staff. So that's one thing that we're looking at. Two, we're looking to see if there are any products and services that we can either tweak or leverage to better serve the needs of people being impacted by domestic violence. So, for example, we have a loan for disaster relief that we typically, only deploy seasonally, but we're now looking to see if we can have that recalibrated into an emergency loan that can really be accessed by anyone, right? Who might need those funds to get into an apartment, to travel, to get away from their abuser, or to, if they need access to medical care or things like that. And then on the policy side, so under the self-help umbrella, there's also the Center for Responsible Lending, which is our policy and advocacy organization. So what types of, policies, can we kind of partner with CRL, on behalf of women and to support the needs of women?
I want to say a few things related to our journey as a team building this initiative and this partnership. So our starting point was how to be more intentional in our approach towards serving everybody better, but particularly the chronically underserved communities, which is like mostly women, immigrant folks, people of color. So our intention was bringing this like holistic perspective towards everything we do. And obviously at self-help, we have 2 credit unions and almost half of our members identifies as women. Majority of our staff identifies as women. And we also want to make sure that how inclusive and accessible we are to our members and to the communities that we serve. What is our internal commitment towards including women in decision making? And also, how do we partner with other nonprofits, other financial institutions, or the investment community to make a change, make a systemic change? So Kim already mentioned a number of the things that we're looking into as a part of this initiative. And also, we are looking into our data. And we also want to make sure that, because we are also a lending institution, we want to make sure that the borrowers, the beneficiaries of our loans are also like equally distributed among genders. And we want to make sure that this is sustainable over the years. So those are like some parts of the conversation. And also, we are advocating for this. We are inviting everybody to be a supporter of this journey towards inclusion. And I want to say that our Women's CD ways of investing in gender equity and supporting systemic change, it's not that hard, it's not that complicated and sophisticated. And there are a number of things that we can do, obviously. So first one is just looking into your own banking relationship. There are lots of organizations like self-help, lots of partner organizations, community banks, other credit unions, local financial institutions who are committed towards real change. So one of the things could be just like simply considering banking with those organizations, or simply moving part of your savings, your modest savings, to those organizations. If you're working for a large corporate who has certain intention towards being more inclusive, maybe talking internally and motivating them to invest with organizations that are truly fighting for change. And at self-help, for example, regarding the investment products, we do have a number of cash investment options, pretty strong financial return, deep community impact. We have our term certificates. One of them is the Women and Children CD that we have been offering. And we give our investors to have a chance to support women's access to finance through investing in those CDs, because we want to make sure that we lend to women business owners. We want to make sure that we provide our services and make them accessible for women to open their first bank account and start building their credit. We want to also make sure that we offer our home lending, our mortgage lending to women, to survivors of intimate partner violence, to single mothers and beyond. So, yeah, there are a number of things definitely folks can do.
And I know some people say, well, why are we focusing so much on women and investing in women? And it's because, as we all know, of the glass ceiling, but they're often the caretakers, most likely the heads of their households. They're more likely to have to leave the workforce to take care of their families, but they also live longer than their partners. And so they typically struggle with their finances at a much, in older age. And so it's really important for women particularly to have good, sound investment and financial information. And so, as Nuray was saying, that these are, and she talked about, these are some good investment vehicles and opportunities to support women survivors. And we didn't quite touch on this, but women entrepreneurs and women business owners during COVID. Women were probably opening businesses at a far rapid rate, right, than at any other time in our history. However, they were the least likely to get funded, to get access to capital, to get access to angel investors, right? So we, as part of this initiative, we also want to leverage our relationships, with investors, impact investors, philanthropic institutions to leverage dollars to, perhaps create a fund, that will support, women entrepreneurs. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, that Nuray and I are really looking at to try to, to implement this initiative. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback from our colleagues at Self Help. Everyone is really excited about it. We're doing it in stages because it's a big project and a big initiative. But we are, one of the great things about being at Self Help is that really supportive of this initiative. And we're just excited, and we're, even more excited to have the opportunity to work with Amy, because as you guys were blown away about a lot of the information that she shared today, we were as well. And so it really made us want to take a deeper look at our work to see, to make sure that we were doing well by our members. And as a former colleague of mine once said, if you care where your money sleeps at night, you'll think about, placing your funds and your access cash into those organizations that, are aligning, your banking with your mission, vision, and values. So
one last question. We ask all of our guests one very important thing. We are Renegade Capital. So, how do you define a renegade?
So I think renegade as a person or like a group of people who thinks that a better world is possible, and who's not afraid to demand that and ask for change and also act for change. For that, I think like all those folks on this call are renegades. I think FreeFrom is a big renegade. I think self-help is a renegade. And I think the feminist movement itself is one of the biggest renegades of all time. So lots of inspiration out there.
So I'm often the person who rarely asks permission, but says I'm sorry. Later, I'm going to travel that road less traveled. I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to think out of the box. I'm going to do my own thing. If everybody's going right, sometimes I might dip left. you know. Yeah, that's just me. So that's my definition of being a renegade.
Think mine's, I love both of those. I think mine's kind of similar, but honestly, Kim, with yours, you kind of gave me a new idea to interject in mine. So I love it. Because I'm really thinking about a renegade as more of a becoming rather than a state of being. Like being a renegade as an activity always, right? And for me, that activity is radical dreaming. And it really is being able to have a vision and an imagination that isn't limited by what exists now and what we understand to be possible. I'm using air quotes, possible, right? But instead, what's impossible, what feels completely undoable, and let's go for that. And it's always that activity though, right? Like continuing that dream, iterating that dream, but always being radical with that dream and always pushing past what is to what can be.
These are great. I always get so inspired by this segment of what is a renegade. It's tremendous to hear from leaders in the field.
I'm psyched. Thank you. I have one other question, and we don't have to include this or not. Amy, tell me more about the name Free From. Free from what?
It's a good question, and it actually I have to admit it was settled on before I joined the organization. But my understanding is that it's free from whatever's real for that individual in terms of like the obstacles that are keeping them back, whether that be gender-based violence. And I want to say too, at Free From, we really sort of question even, this is kind of getting in the weeds, but like question even the terminology of gender-based violence, right? Because and moving beyond the interpersonal and into the systemic, right? Because with 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 it being the prevalence again, we're not talking about a series of independent short-term crises. We're talking about a systemic problem. And systemic problems are societal responsibilities. And so we're really trying to be antagonists of where is the societal responsibility and accountability for this? Because the approaches so far we haven't seen that. We haven't seen the societal accountability piece. And you might be like, okay, why are we here when I asked you what Free From meant or stood for? But I think that really what I'm getting at is it is beyond the interpersonal. It's like, because we can't really solve gender-based violence until we improve the systems that are in place that are allowing it to persist and to thrive. So people who are subjected to gender-based violence aren't just subjected to oppression from that harm doer, but they're also, credit card companies, whatever the case may be, start standing in the shoes of that harm doer after the fact when somebody can't get support to get relief from their coerced or fraudulent debt, right? When someone isn't able to get the support from these institutions, then the institutions become the harm doer. So it's free from harm from an individual, but it's also free from harm from unfair, oppressive systems that are existing in our society.
Access to $289 and starting a new life from that. That is, I can't get away from that one, and how terrifying that is.
Yeah, it makes me nervous to even think about it. It's extremely overwhelming. I also left that like really inspired. One, it forced me to get out of my little bubble of what my life is like, and realize that hey, people are really facing some hard challenges out here. One thing that stood out to me is also the language that Amy was using. She didn't use the word victim. She used the word survivor and harm doer. And that was she realized the power of words and also the ability for people to own their own story. And so very similar to what Leah was saying, like she was in freeform is giving people and survivors their power back in multiple ways.
Yeah, I think I was struck by this dollar amount, and I asked Amy about that, the 250, and I forget the stat exactly, but it was over millions of dollars of these trust grants. And my initial reaction was like, well, double it, give them $500. Like, and I mean, we didn't have enough time to understand why that might not be feasible for whatever reasons, but then I started to think about with self-help there. It's like, well, if they had $1,000, could they use some of it for the car repair and then start a savings account? But then that's me taking out the emergency situation, the emotion, like, like I went very practical. Well, give them a little bit more money and then they can start the independence stuff. And it's like, probably not, maybe it's just getting a hotel room and getting a respite for 3 or 4 days while their partner calms down and they can go back when it's safe and then get their like I have not experienced that situation. So kind of how $250 could be so meaningful. When I was, I could spend that on groceries this weekend, sometimes at dinner when you're out with your friends. I mean, what we take for granted can really save someone's life, in different contexts. It's hard to absorb that sometimes,
I was in a weird place with the whole conversation because this is day 7 of being financially dependent on my spouse because I am now a stay-at-home mom and don't have income coming in, and just what that means and how incredibly privileged I am to be able to do that and still feel financially independent and like truly feel financially independent, and how much of a system and systemic issue it is with women in finance and how we feel about our ability to manage finances and cultural persuasion to find a man who can take care of your bills, right? And what kind of situation that puts you in, and how complex and nuanced everything is. Even after the conversation, Ebony, you asked me before how strongly I felt it is important to be financially independent. My answer hasn't changed. I feel very lucky in the partnership that I have, but just that it is so complex.
I also really like marital status diversity among us. Because one thing that I will share is that Renegade Capital, we support marriage and love. We support healthy marriage and healthy love. And so we are not encouraging anyone to leave healthy situations.
Unless you want to.
Unless you want to. Hey, that's on you too, babe.
Yeah.
But just make sure that you're in a situation that feeds both of you and provides a stable and healthy financial situation for everybody involved.
Yeah. I had never heard the term economic violence before. I'd never heard that term before, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking of so many stories from friends and from family who are like, oh my God, it is rampant. And it's like, is this real or is this not real, or is this just bad financial management? And again, I'm using big words or like extremes, but the nuance of that situation and how hard it is to be able to identify it and acknowledge it and then find a way through, and how easy it would be to get trapped in a bad situation.
I'm also viewing it from the lens of and please forgive me for my heteronormative thinking, but the lens of young boys who don't know what they're doing, who are taught, hey, as a man, you are supposed to control the pocketbook. You are supposed to not allow your partner to make those decisions. You cover all of it, and your pride should not allow you to reach out for help. because if you do that, you show that you are less of a man. And it's, I won't say it's all their fault, but they were taught this, and it shouldn't have to be that way. Um, this is a much bigger issue, more than we can hit on in 40 or 50 minutes. But I am glad that we're talking about it. And I'm even more so glad that there are some people out here and some organizations that are making, doing some work in order to try and change it. And our audience can too.
What was your big takeaway, Ebony, for how we can work to change it?
Oh, yeah. Number one, be aware. Know that this is happening. And number two, look at your financial institutions. See and ask these questions. Like, ask your banks and your credit unions, are you doing anything to support, women experiencing domestic violence? They may not have thought about it. And if they aren't, move your money. Self-help clearly said that they're doing some work. And they want to be able to hold some of your cash-based savings. So yeah, I think there are some options here.
Great. This was a good episode. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Welcome back, folks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Renegade Capital Podcast. You can listen to previous episodes on your favorite podcasting platform, and be sure to follow us on social media at Renegade Capital Podcast, or check out our website at www.renegadecapitalpodcast.com to never miss a new release.